Tom Brady was just enjoying a quiet evening walk when he heard something that made his blood run cold. Laughter, but not the kind that brings joy. As he turned the corner, he saw a group of bikers surrounding a young girl in a wheelchair, their voices dripping with cruelty. What happened next left everyone speechless. You won't believe how this night unfolded. Watch until the end, and let us know in the comments what you would do in Tom's place. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that matters. Tom Brady rarely had the luxury of quiet moments. His life revolved around rigorous training, high-stakes games, and the constant demands of public appearances. But tonight was different. Tonight, he had carved out a rare moment for himself, a peaceful evening walk through the park, away from cameras, crowds, and obligations. The air was crisp, and the park was relatively empty, aside from a few joggers and scattered dog walkers. The rhythmic crunch of gravel beneath his sneakers was the only sound accompanying him. It was a moment of serenity he didn't often experience. Then he heard it. Laughter. Not the joyful, innocent kind, but sharp and taunting. It cut through the quiet like a knife, carrying a cruel edge that sent a ripple of unease through Tom. His stride slowed, and his eyes narrowed as he scanned the dimly lit path ahead. A group of figures clustered around a lone person near one of the benches. From a distance, it might have looked like a casual conversation, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. As Tom drew closer, the scene became clearer. 5 men, dressed in dark leather jackets adorned with patches and skull insignias, loomed over a small figure in a wheelchair. A little girl. Her tiny hands gripped the armrests tightly, her knuckles white, her dark eyes filled with fear. One of the men, a burly figure with a red snake tattoo slithering up his neck, leaned in toward her with a smirk. "Look what we've got here," he sneered, nudging the wheelchair with his boot. "A little cripple thinking she belongs in a place like this." Another biker, wiry with a scar running down his cheek, chuckled. "Ain't she adorable? Rolling around like she owns the place." The girl didn't say a word. She just sat there, frozen, her body trembling as the men loomed closer. One of them reached for the backpack hanging from the back of her wheelchair and yanked it off. "What do we have here?" he mused, unzipping it and dumping its contents onto the ground. A few personal belongings spilled out. Some colored pencils, a folded piece of paper, and a small, well-worn stuffed animal. But what caught Tom's eye was the inhaler that tumbled onto the pavement, rolling to a stop near his foot. He stepped forward. "Evening," he said, his voice calm but firm. The bikers turned, their sneers fading slightly as they sized him up. The man with the red snake tattoo was the first to speak. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" Tom ignored the question. His eyes locked onto the girls, offering silent reassurance before shifting back to the group. "You're making her uncomfortable," he said evenly. The leader of the bikers scoffed. "Oh yeah? And what's it to you, pretty boy? You heard Daddy?" Tom shook his head, stepping closer. "Just someone who doesn't like seeing people get picked on." The wiry man with the scar chuckled darkly. "You hear that, boys? We got ourselves a damn hero." The bikers laughed, their taunts echoing through the park. But Tom wasn't fazed. He had faced trash talk from the toughest men in the NFL. These guys didn't intimidate him. One of them took a step closer, a heavy-set man with a thick beard. He gestured at Tom's face. "Wait a minute, I know this guy. That's Tom Brady." The leader's smirk returned. Well, Mr. Super Bowl, what's the matter, champ? Not enough cameras around for you? Thought you'd come out here and be a big hero?" Tom didn't respond to the taunts. Instead, he gestured toward the girl's belongings on the ground. "Give her back her bag." The leader glanced at the backpack still clutched in one of the biker's hands and grinned. "I don't think so. She should be grateful we're even paying her any attention." Tom's jaw tightened. The leader took a step toward him, his smirk widening. "You're real brave, walking into this alone. You sure you want to do this?" Tom didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I'm sure." The air grew heavier. The bikers exchanged glances, and then, in an instant, the leader grabbed the handles of the girl's wheelchair and tilted it back slightly. She gasped, clutching the armrests, her eyes wide with terror. Tom moved. Before the leader could tip the chair further, Tom lunged forward, his hand snapping around the biker's wrist. With a quick twist, he forced him to release his grip. The biker stumbled back with a curse. The bearded man lunged next, swinging a meaty fist at Tom's head. Tom sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing the man's arm and using his own momentum to send him crashing into the nearby bench. The scar-faced biker snarled and reached for something inside his jacket. Tom was faster. He kicked the man's legs out from under him, sending him sprawling onto the pavement. The leader recovered quickly, rage twisting his features. He pulled a switchblade from his pocket, flicking it open with a snap. "Big mistake, pretty boy," he growled. Tom's muscles tensed, instincts kicking in. He had dealt with defensive linemen trying to crush him for years. These guys were nothing compared to that. The leader lunged. Tom sidestepped at the last second, catching the man's wrist and twisting sharply. The knife clattered to the ground. Tom followed up with a powerful shove that sent the leader staggering backward, his boots scraping against the pavement. The other bikers hesitated now, their earlier confidence replaced with unease. The girl, still frozen in her chair, looked up at Tom with something close to awe. The leader clutched his wrist, glaring at Tom with unmasked fury. "You think this is over?" he spat. Tom met his gaze, unwavering. "Walk away." For a moment, the leader didn't move, but then, with a curse, he motioned to the others. "Let's go." One by one, the bikers retreated into the shadows, their footsteps fading into the distance. Tom exhaled slowly, his heart still pounding. Then he turned back to the girl. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, though her hands were still trembling. "Yeah, I think so." Tom crouched down, picking up her inhaler and handing it to her. "Here." She took it, her fingers curling around it tightly. "What's your name?" Tom asked. "Lily," she whispered. "Well, Lily, you're pretty tough," Tom said with a small smile. "Let's get you out of here." As he helped her gather her things, a nagging feeling crept up his spine. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Tom Brady stood with Lily in the quiet park, the tension still thick in the air after the confrontation with the bikers. He could see the fear lingering in her eyes, her small hands clutching her inhaler tightly. The silence was unnerving, and Tom's instincts were on high alert. He scanned the shadows, his eyes narrowing as he tried to assess the situation. Something felt off, a nagging feeling that the bikers hadn't truly left. Lily was visibly shaken, her breathing uneven, but she managed to meet his gaze. "Are they gone?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Tom crouched down to her level, offering a reassuring smile. "For now," he said calmly, though he wasn't entirely convinced. "Let's get you somewhere safe." He picked up her scattered belongings, carefully placing them back in her backpack. Among the items was a crumpled drawing, worn from use. It depicted a figure standing tall, shielding another from harm, a scene that hit close to home. Tom handed her the bag, and she hugged it close, her wide eyes still darting around nervously. As they turned toward the park's exit, Tom's sharp ears caught the faint sound of footsteps approaching. They were heavy, deliberate, echoing ominously through the quiet night. He paused, muscles tensing, and turned back toward the source of the noise. Emerging from the shadows was the same biker with the red snake tattoo, but this time he wasn't alone. 4 more bikers flanked him, their faces twisted in sinister grins. 2 of them held chains. One had a crowbar, and the leader's expression was dark with fury. "Thought you could mess with us and get away with it, pretty boy," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. Tom moved instinctively, positioning himself between Lily and the approaching gang. "This isn't worth it," he warned, his voice steady. The leader laughed mockingly, the sound cold and cruel. "You embarrassed me in front of my crew," he spat. "Now we're going to show you how we deal with people who don't know their place." The bikers advanced, their weapons glinting under the dim light of the street lamps. Tom's mind raced, calculating his options. The odds weren't in his favor, but he couldn't show weakness. He'd faced aggressive defenses on the football field countless times. This situation required the same precision and strategy. One of the bikers lunged forward, swinging his chain in a wide arc. Tom ducked low, narrowly avoiding the strike, and countered with a swift punch to the attacker's gut, sending him reeling backward. Another charged with the crowbar, raising it high above his head. Tom sidestepped, grabbed the man's arm, and twisted it sharply, forcing the weapon to clatter to the ground. The leader's eyes burned with rage as he pulled a knife from his pocket and flicked it open. "Big mistake, Brady," he growled, lunging at him. Tom reacted instantly, using his speed and agility to evade the blade. He caught the biker's wrist, twisted it, and delivered a powerful knee to the man's stomach, knocking the wind out of him. The other bikers hesitated, their confidence wavering as they saw their leader stagger back. Lily watched in awe, her fear momentarily forgotten. Tom could feel the adrenaline surging through him, his focus razor-sharp. "You still think this is a good idea?" he asked, his voice cold. The leader spat on the ground, glaring at him defiantly. "This ain't over," he snarled, but the threat in his voice was hollow. He motioned to his crew, and they reluctantly retreated, their footsteps fading into the darkness. Tom didn't relax until they were completely out of sight. He turned back to Lily, crouching down beside her. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, though her hands were still trembling. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Tom offered a gentle smile. "You're safe now. Let's get you home." But as they made their way out of the park, a nagging feeling lingered in the back of his mind. This wasn't over. The leader's words echoed ominously in his ears, a promise of future trouble. Tom knew he'd have to stay vigilant, not just for himself, but for Lily's safety. The night was far from over, and he could sense the storm brewing on the horizon. Tom Brady's mind remained sharp as he and Lily moved through the park, his body still pulsing with adrenaline from the confrontation. The night air felt heavier now, as if the tension from the fight hadn't fully faded. Lily clutched her backpack tightly, her breathing still uneven, but she was quiet. Tom glanced down at her, his protective instincts kicking in. She was just a kid, caught in the middle of something she never should have had to endure. He needed to get her out of here. They hadn't made it far when a rustling sound behind them made Tom stop. His muscles tensed as he turned his head slightly, his sharp instincts kicking in. The park was eerily silent, but he knew better. He'd played in enough high-pressure situations to recognize when a threat was lurking just out of sight. Then he heard it. Heavy footsteps, multiple, fast approaching. He barely had time to react before one of the bikers from before lunged from the shadows, swinging a length of chain. Tom grabbed Lily's wheelchair handles and pushed her to the side just as the chain snapped through the air where she had been. The attack had begun. Another biker, the one with the scar down his cheek, rushed at Tom with a wild punch. Tom ducked low, twisting his body and driving his shoulder into the man's chest like he would against a defensive lineman. The force sent the man stumbling backward onto the pavement. Before Tom could recover, two more attackers advanced. Lily screamed as one of the bikers grabbed her wheelchair and yanked it backward. "No!" she cried, kicking her legs, trying to fight back. Tom's entire body tensed with fury. His feet moved before his mind could process. He sprinted toward the man holding Lily and hit him hard, his full weight driving into the biker's chest like a perfect quarterback sack. The biker gasped as he was thrown backward onto the ground. Tom immediately stepped in front of Lily again, his eyes burning with determination. Another biker came at him swinging a metal pipe. Tom dodged the first strike, barely missing the sharp whistling of metal cutting through the air. The second swing came faster, aimed for his ribs. Tom reacted instinctively, catching the man's wrist mid-swing and twisting sharply. The biker howled in pain, dropping the pipe. Tom didn't give him a chance to recover. He slammed his knee into the man's stomach, sending him crumpling to the ground. The leader of the bikers, the one with the red snake tattoo, stood a few feet away, watching with narrowed eyes. His expression was dark, calculating. He wasn't making a move. Not yet. He was waiting. Tom could feel the intensity of the standoff, the way the others hesitated now that two of their men were down. They hadn't expected him to fight back like this. "Back off," Tom said, his voice low and controlled. "I don't want to hurt anyone else." The leader smirked. "You think this is over, football boy?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a switchblade. The silver blade glinted under the park's dim light. Tom immediately adjusted his stance. He wasn't afraid of the knife itself. He'd trained in hand-to-hand combat before, but one wrong move could turn this situation deadly. The leader flicked the blade between his fingers, his smirk widening. "You've got a real hero complex, don't you? Think you can save every little cripple you find?" Tom's blood boiled. His fist clenched, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Put the knife down," he said. The leader took a step forward. "Or what?" Tom didn't have time to answer. The man lunged, the blade flashing toward him. Tom twisted to the side, just barely avoiding the slash. He grabbed the leader's wrist, twisting it hard, forcing the knife downward. The leader tried to resist, but Tom had the advantage. With one sharp movement, he slammed the biker's arm against his knee, and the knife clattered to the ground. The leader cursed, stumbling back, clutching his wrist. His confidence wavered for the first time. The other bikers exchanged uncertain glances. Their advantage had crumbled. Tom didn't lower his guard. He remained in front of Lily, ready for another attack. "This is over," he said firmly. The leader glared at him, breathing heavily. Then, with a sneer, he spat on the ground. "We'll see about that." With that, he turned and walked away. The other bikers hesitated for a moment, but one by one, they followed him into the darkness. Tom didn't move until their footsteps had completely disappeared. Only then did he exhale, his shoulders finally relaxing. Behind him, Lily's breaths were shaky, but she was staring at him with wide eyes. You stopped them," she said, almost disbelieving. Tom crouched down, meeting her gaze. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly. "I think so." Tom gave her a reassuring smile. "Good. Let's get out of here before they change their minds." But even as they left the park, Tom knew the truth. This wasn't over. Not yet. Tom Brady guided Lily toward the park's exit, his senses still on high alert. The encounter had left him rattled, but his concern wasn't for himself. He kept glancing at Lily, her small hands gripping the armrests of her wheelchair as she tried to steady her breathing. She had been through something no child should ever have to face, and though she was trying to be brave, Tom could see the fear lingering in her eyes. She didn't say much as they moved forward, but her shoulders remained tense, her fingers trembling slightly each time she adjusted her grip. Tom wanted to reassure her, to tell her that the worst was over, but deep down he wasn't convinced. The way the leader of the bikers had spoken before retreating left a gnawing feeling in his gut. They reached the sidewalk outside the park, where the street lights cast long, flickering shadows on the pavement. Cars passed occasionally in the distance, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Tom scanned the area, making sure the bikers weren't following. He pulled out his phone and quickly dialed the police. As he waited for an answer, he crouched down beside Lily. "We're almost safe," he told her gently. "Just hang tight." She nodded but didn't respond. The call connected, and Tom gave a quick, detailed account of what had happened. The dispatcher listened carefully and assured him that officers would be sent to the park immediately. "Stay where you are," the dispatcher advised. "We'll send a patrol car to you." Tom ended the call and exhaled, finally feeling a small sense of relief. He turned to Lily. "They're on their way," he said. "You're going to be okay." Lily's lips pressed together in a thin line, and, for the first time, she spoke hesitantly. "They're going to come back, aren't they?" Tom didn't lie. "Maybe," he admitted, "but I won't let them hurt you." She looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes studying his face as if trying to decide whether or not she could trust his words. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. Before Tom could respond, something caught his attention. A sharp, distant whistle. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He turned toward the sound, his stomach tightening. Footsteps, fast, heavy, coming back toward them. Tom's body went rigid as shadows moved in the distance. The leader of the bikers emerged first, his red snake tattoo almost glowing under the street lights. This time, he wasn't alone. At least 6 new men flanked him, their faces cold and menacing. One of them carried a length of pipe, another swung a chain between his fingers. Another had a broken bottle clutched in his fist. They looked prepared, emboldened by their numbers. Tom took a deep breath, instinctively stepping in front of Lily. His mind worked fast. He needed to protect her, but he was outnumbered worse than before. This wasn't a fight he could walk away from without a plan. The leader grinned wickedly. "I told you it wasn't over." Tom kept his voice calm, controlled. "You really want to do this?" The leader took a step closer, the others moving with him like a pack of wolves. "You made me look weak, Brady," he growled. "I can't let that slide." Tom's jaw tightened. "You did that to yourself." The leader's grin faltered, his eyes flashing with anger. He turned to his men. "Teach him a lesson." The first attacker swung the chain in a wide arc, aiming for Tom's head. Tom ducked at the last second, feeling the rush of air as the chain missed by inches. Before the man could recover, Tom surged forward, slamming his shoulder into the biker's chest with the force of a linebacker. The impact sent the man sprawling onto the pavement. The next attacker came with the pipe. Tom sidestepped, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted hard. The pipe clattered to the ground, and Tom drove a powerful elbow into the man's ribs, knocking him backward. But the bikers weren't stopping. Another one lunged with the broken bottle, jabbing at Tom's side. Tom caught the attacker's wrist just in time, forcing it downward. With a quick, controlled movement, he twisted the man's arm and sent him crashing onto the ground. But they kept coming. The leader charged, swinging a fist at Tom's face. Tom blocked it with his forearm, but the impact sent a jolt of pain through his arm. He barely had time to recover before another biker grabbed him from behind, trying to restrain him. Tom reacted instinctively. He stomped down hard on the man's foot, then threw his head back, smashing it into the attacker's nose. The biker yelped, releasing him just in time for Tom to pivot and land a powerful punch to his gut. Lily screamed as one of the bikers grabbed her wheelchair, trying to wheel her away. Tom! Tom's heart pounded. He bolted toward her, shoving another biker out of the way. He reached the man holding Lily and yanked him backward, sending him stumbling. With one swift motion, Tom righted the wheelchair and crouched beside Lily. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head quickly, though her breathing was fast and panicked. Tom turned back to the remaining bikers. Some were still standing, but most looked uncertain now. Their confidence had cracked. The leader was the only one who still looked furious. He reached into his jacket, pulling out another knife. Tom exhaled slowly. "Really?" The leader sneered. "You think you can take me?" Tom didn't hesitate. As the man lunged, Tom dodged, grabbing his wrist and twisting with precision. The knife hit the ground with a metallic clatter. Before the leader could recover, Tom landed a brutal strike to his ribs, knocking him to the pavement. Silence fell over the street. The remaining bikers hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. One by one, they started backing away. The leader groaned, clutching his side, but even he knew the fight was over. Tom stood over him. "This is done." The leader glared up at him but said nothing. With a growl, he staggered to his feet and gestured for his men to leave. The group disappeared into the night, their retreating footsteps fading. Tom let out a slow breath, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He turned to Lily, who was staring at him with wide eyes. "You okay?" he asked again. She nodded slowly. You stopped them again." Tom smiled slightly. "Yeah, let's get out of here." But even as he said it, he knew this wasn't the last he'd see of them. The leader's eyes had held a promise, one Tom wasn't going to ignore. Tom Brady didn't let his guard down as he and Lily left the park. His mind was still racing, processing every moment of the fight. He had taken down the bikers twice now, but the way the leader had looked at him before retreating left an uneasy feeling in his gut. That wasn't the look of someone who had accepted defeat. That was the look of a man planning his next move. Lily sat quietly in her wheelchair, her hands gripping the edges so tightly that her knuckles were pale. She hadn't said much since the last attack. Tom could tell she was still scared, and he couldn't blame her. He crouched down next to her as they stopped near a busier intersection. The street lights cast long shadows across the pavement, and the distant hum of traffic felt strangely distant. "We should call the police again," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Let them know those guys came back." Lily hesitated, then nodded. I lost my phone. It was in my backpack." Her voice was small, ashamed, as if she thought it was her fault. Tom frowned, anger bubbling inside him again at what those bikers had done. He pulled out his own phone and handed it to her. "Call them. Tell them everything. I'll watch our backs." She took the phone with shaky fingers, dialing with more confidence than he expected. As she spoke to the dispatcher, Tom turned back toward the park. The place where they had just fought was eerily silent now, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. His instincts told him they weren't safe yet. He glanced at Lily as she finished the call. "They said they'll send more officers," she said, then bit her lip. "But they don't think they'll catch them if they already ran." Tom exhaled slowly. He had expected as much. He wasn't naive. Guys like that didn't just give up. They hid, regrouped, and struck when it was least expected. And if they had truly taken this as an insult, they wouldn't let it go. "Then we need to get you home," he said. Lily hesitated again. "I don't really have a home," she admitted, looking down. "I was at the shelter before, but—" She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. Tom understood instantly. She was alone. His jaw tightened, and a wave of anger surged through him, not at her, but at the world that had put her in this position. A kid, abandoned, left to fend for herself against men who thought they could do whatever they wanted just because they were stronger. He couldn't let this slide. "We'll figure something out," he promised. "But first, we need to get somewhere safe." Before she could answer, a sound made Tom's stomach drop. A sharp whistle cutting through the night like a blade. His entire body tensed. The bikers were back. The sound of heavy boots echoed down the street. Tom turned sharply, positioning himself in front of Lily again. He had been expecting this, but the reality of it still sent a jolt of adrenaline through his veins. They were smarter this time, waiting until he was distracted, thinking he had won. He saw them emerging from the shadows, more of them than before. The leader, the man with the red snake tattoo, was at the front again, but now there were at least 8 others flanking him. Some had the same weapons, chains, pipes, knives, but 2 of them carried baseball bats. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was an ambush. Lily gasped behind him, gripping the arms of her wheelchair so tightly that her fingers dug into the fabric. Tom didn't speak. He didn't need to. He could see from the leader's face that this was meant to end tonight. "You don't know when to quit," Tom said, keeping his voice steady. The leader grinned. "Neither do you." The men spread out, cutting off every exit. One of them stepped toward Lily's wheelchair. "Time to teach this little brat some respect," he sneered. Tom's blood ran hot. His entire body coiled like a spring, ready to explode. "Touch her, and you won't get back up." The leader laughed. "Big talk, football boy. Let's see if you can back it up." He snapped his fingers and the gang attacked. Tom moved on instinct. The first man swung a bat at his ribs, but Tom sidestepped, catching the man's wrist and twisting sharply. The bat dropped, and Tom landed a powerful elbow strike to the man's jaw, sending him to the ground. Another biker came at him with a chain, swinging wildly. Tom ducked low, driving his shoulder into the attacker's gut like a perfect tackle. The impact sent the man crashing into another biker, both of them falling into a heap. But there were too many. A fist slammed into Tom's back, forcing him forward. Another grabbed his arm, trying to pin him. Tom fought back, twisting and throwing a punch into the attacker's ribs, but a third man kicked his legs out from under him. He hit the pavement hard, pain jolting up his spine. Lily screamed. Tom gritted his teeth, forcing himself up even as another boot slammed into his side. He ignored the pain. He had to get to her. The leader of the bikers crouched beside Lily's wheelchair, gripping the armrest with one hand. "Tough night, huh?" he taunted. Lily whimpered, her body frozen with fear. Tom surged forward. He grabbed the leader's collar and yanked him backward with all his strength, throwing him onto the pavement. The man cursed as he hit the ground, but Tom didn't stop. He turned, delivering a brutal kick to the ribs of another biker who had been moving toward Lily. The man collapsed, groaning. The others hesitated now. Tom was bruised, breathing heavily but still standing. The leader staggered to his feet, glaring at him. "You don't quit, do you?" Tom wiped the blood from his lip. "Not when it matters." The leader scowled, but Tom could see it now. The doubt in his eyes, the hesitation. This wasn't going the way they had planned. Tom wasn't just some random guy. He wasn't someone who would roll over and take it. He had fought back harder than they expected, and now they were the ones second-guessing themselves. Then, in the distance, sirens wailed. The leader tensed. The others looked at each other uneasily. The police were coming. Tom didn't move. He just stared at the leader, daring him to try something. Finally, the man cursed under his breath and backed away. "This ain't over," he growled. He turned and ran. The others hesitated for only a second before following him, disappearing into the night. Tom let out a slow breath. His body ached, his muscles burned, but it didn't matter. He turned to Lily. "They're gone," he said softly. She let out a shaky breath, her entire body trembling. "I thought—" "You're safe," Tom interrupted gently. "I promise." The sirens grew louder. A moment later, red and blue lights flooded the street. Tom finally let himself relax, but deep down, he knew this wasn't over yet. Tom Brady stood in the glow of flashing red and blue lights, his chest rising and falling as he tried to steady his breathing. His muscles ached from the fight, and he could already feel the bruises forming, but none of that mattered right now. The police had finally arrived. Officers moved quickly, scanning the area, speaking into radios, and assessing the aftermath of the attack. Tom kept his eyes on Lily, making sure she was still okay. She was gripping the arms of her wheelchair tightly, her knuckles pale, but she wasn't crying. She was just staring at the empty street where the bikers had fled, her breathing shaky but controlled. An officer approached, a stocky man with a sharp, assessing gaze. His name tag read Daniels. "We got a call about an attack," he said, his voice serious. His eyes flickered over Tom, taking in his bruised knuckles and the torn sleeve of his jacket. "Looks like you've been through hell." Tom exhaled, forcing himself to focus. "They jumped us twice," he said, his voice steady. "They were harassing her first. I stepped in, they backed off, but then they came back. More of them." Daniels nodded, scribbling something in his notebook. "You recognize them?" Tom gave a sharp nod. "Bikers, leather jackets, skull patches. Leader has a red snake tattoo on his neck. They were armed." Another officer, a younger man with close-cropped hair, approached with a grim expression. "Check the area, sir. No sign of them now." Daniels sighed, rubbing the back of his head. "They know how to run." He turned to Lily, his tone softening. "Hey, sweetheart, I know this is scary, but can you tell me anything? Did they say anything to you?" Lily hesitated, looking down at her hands. Her fingers curled around the fabric of her jeans, gripping tightly. "They called me names," she murmured. "Said I didn't belong here." Her voice wavered. "Said people like me should know their place." Tom clenched his jaw, anger flaring in his chest again. Daniel's face darkened. He exchanged a glance with his partner before nodding. "Same guys we've been trying to pin down for a while," he muttered. "Been running small-time crime around here, intimidating people. No one ever stands up to them." Tom's gaze hardened. "That's probably why they didn't take it well when I did." Daniels exhaled. "Yeah? And now they'll want to make an example out of you." He flipped his notebook shut. "We'll do our best to track them down, but guys like that, they don't let things go." He studied Tom carefully. "You need to be careful." Tom nodded, but he didn't need the warning. He already knew this wasn't over. The officer crouched in front of Lily, softening his tone. "You got somewhere safe to go?" Lily hesitated. Tom saw the flicker of uncertainty in her face. She didn't want to admit the truth. He stepped in before she had to. "She's with me," he said firmly. Daniels raised an eyebrow. "That's so?" Tom nodded. "I'm not leaving her alone after this." The officer studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. But we'll need a statement from both of you first." It took nearly an hour. Tom gave a full account of everything that happened, leaving nothing out. Lily spoke too, though her voice was quieter. She described the taunts, the fear, the moment when the bikers tried to roll her away. The officers listened carefully, taking notes. When they were done, Daniels handed Tom a card. "If they show up again, you call us immediately. And if you see something off, anything suspicious, don't try to handle it yourself." Tom took the card, but both he and Daniels knew the reality. If the bikers came back, there wouldn't be time for a phone call. Lily let out a breath of relief as the officers packed up, promising to patrol the area more frequently. She looked exhausted, her small frame sagging in her wheelchair. Tom crouched next to her, offering a reassuring smile. "Come on, let's get you somewhere safe." They left the scene, moving through the now quiet streets. Tom could feel the weight of the night pressing on him, but he wasn't done. Not yet. He wasn't the kind of man who stepped into a fight and walked away before it was over. And something told him that the leader of the bikers wasn't the kind of man who took defeat easily. He would be back, and Tom would be ready. Tom Brady kept his pace steady as he pushed Lily's wheelchair down the quiet street, his eyes scanning every shadow, every parked car, every alley. The bikers were gone for now, but he wasn't foolish enough to think they wouldn't come back. He could still feel the weight of the fight in his muscles, the sharp sting of bruises forming under his skin, but his focus was on Lily. She hadn't spoken since they left the police, her small hands gripping the armrests of her chair so tightly her knuckles were pale. He glanced down at her, softening his voice. "How are you holding up?" Lily hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "I don't know." Tom nodded. It wasn't the kind of thing a kid should ever have to process. "We'll figure it out," he said. She looked up at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "Why did you help me?" The question caught him off guard. He thought for a second, then gave her the only answer that felt right. "Because someone had to." Lily's lips pressed together, and for the first time that night, some of the fear in her expression faded. They walked in silence for a few more minutes before Tom reached his car, parked near the edge of the block. He opened the passenger side door, hesitating as he looked at her wheelchair. "Can you transfer yourself in, or do you need help?" Lily frowned at the question, then grumbled, "I can do it." She moved her body carefully, shifting her weight with effort. Tom watched without stepping in, letting her handle it on her own. Once she was settled, he folded the wheelchair and placed it in the trunk before getting behind the wheel. As they pulled away from the curb, Tom's mind kept replaying the fight. The bikers had underestimated him, but their leader hadn't looked like a man who accepted defeat. His threat still echoed in Tom's ears. "This ain't over." Tom's jaw tightened. If that man came after Lily again, there would be no hesitation next time. Lily shifted in her seat. "Where are we going?" Tom exhaled, gripping the wheel. "Somewhere safe, a hotel for tonight. We'll figure the rest out in the morning." She didn't argue. She just nodded, her body slumping slightly in exhaustion. She had been through hell, and she needed rest. Tom understood that better than anyone. The city lights blurred past as they drove. Tom's mind wasn't on the road, it was on what came next. The police were involved, but that didn't mean the bikers would stop. He had made an enemy tonight, and if they were the kind of men he suspected, they wouldn't just let this go. He pulled into the hotel parking lot, stepping out and retrieving the wheelchair. As he helped Lily inside, he made a silent promise. No matter what happened, he wouldn't let them hurt her again. This wasn't over, but neither was he. Tom Brady proved that being a hero isn't just about winning on the field. It's about standing up when it matters most. But is this really the end, or just the beginning of something bigger? One thing is certain. Some battles don't end with a single fight. What would you have done in Tom's place? Let us know in the comments, and if you want more powerful stories like this, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video.